Emma sat alone in her small, dimly lit apartment, her eyes fixed on the raindrops trailing down the window. Outside, the city was a blur of gray, each drop colliding with the glass in a relentless, rhythmic patter. The room was quiet, save for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the wooden floorboards. Emma had always found comfort in the solitude, a refuge after the chaos of her recent divorce from Ethan. They had been together for 7 years, married for 5, and now, at 34, Emma was trying to piece together the fragments of a life she no longer recognized. Just as she was reaching for her cup of lukewarm tea, the phone rang. Emma glanced at the screen. It was Lisa. Her heart sank slightly, a familiar knot forming in her stomach. Despite their shared blood and shared childhood, their relationship had always been complicated. Lisa was 4 years younger, the pretty, reckless one who always seemed to get away with everything, while Emma was the responsible older sister who had played peacemaker, the one who had been left to pick up the pieces whenever Lisa's life inevitably spiraled out of control. "Hey," Emma answered, forcing a brightness she didn't feel. "Emma." Lisa's voice was shaky, breathless, and instantly, Emma's heart rate quickened. There was something undeniably off about her tone. Lisa was crying, not the usual theatrical, attention-seeking sobs Emma had grown accustomed to, but a deep, gut-wrenching sort of cry that made Emma sit up straighter. "What's wrong?" Emma asked, her pulse thrumming in her ears. It's bad," Lisa choked out, her breaths coming in uneven gasps. "I don't know what to do. I really don't." Emma's grip tightened around the phone. "Calm down. Take a deep breath. Tell me what happened." There was a long, tense pause. Emma could hear the muffled sound of cars passing by in the background, a distant honking horn, a baby crying somewhere nearby. Then Lisa finally spoke, her voice a raw, quivering whisper. "I am sick, Emma. I'm really, really sick." The words hit Emma like a sledgehammer, knocking the air from her lungs. Lisa had always been dramatic, prone to exaggeration, but this felt different. There was a gravity to her tone that made Emma's skin prickle with unease. "What do you mean, sick?" Emma asked, her voice soft but firm. "What's going on?" Lisa took a shuddering breath. "I went to the doctor last week. I've been having these terrible headaches, dizziness. I thought it was just stress, but they ran some tests and they found something. A tumor." Emma's blood ran cold. "A tumor?" "In my brain," Lisa whispered, her voice breaking. "They said it's not cancerous, but it's growing. And if I don't get surgery soon, it could become life-threatening." Emma's mind reeled, her thoughts spinning like a carousel of disjointed images and half-formed memories. Lisa at 9, falling off her bike and scraping her knees, crying as Emma patched her up. Lisa at 16, sneaking out in the middle of the night to meet some boy who broke her heart a week later. Lisa at 25, calling Emma from the side of the road, her car broken down and her bank account empty, begging Emma to bail her out once again. But this was different. This wasn't some petty crisis or self-inflicted disaster. This was serious. This was life and death. "Oh my God," Emma murmured, pressing a trembling hand to her mouth. "Lisa, I don't know what to say. They said I need surgery as soon as possible," Lisa continued, her words tumbling out in a frantic rush. "But my insurance doesn't cover the whole procedure. I need £5,000 to cover the rest, and I don't have it. I tried asking Mom and Dad, but they're strapped right now. And Ethan, he doesn't want anything to do with me. I have nowhere else to turn, Emma. Please, you're my only hope." The desperation in Lisa's voice was palpable, wrapping around Emma like a vice. Emma swallowed hard, her mind racing. £5,000. It was a lot of money, especially now, after the divorce, after the lawyers, and the endless fees that had drained her savings. She was barely getting by herself, scraping together just enough to cover rent and bills, trying to rebuild a life she'd once thought was unshakable. But this was Lisa, her sister, the girl who used to crawl into Emma's bed during thunderstorms, clutching her stuffed rabbit and whispering, "Don't let the lightning get me." The girl who had once been her best friend, her confidant, the one person Emma had always promised to protect, no matter what. "Are you sure?" Emma asked, her voice wavering. Are you sure they said surgery is the only option? Yes, Lisa said, her breath hitching. And if I don't get it soon, they said the tumor could keep growing. I could lose my vision, my memory, or worse. Emma closed her eyes, the room spinning. The thought of Lisa lying in a hospital bed, hooked up to machines, her life hanging by a thread, was more than she could bear. Okay, Emma said finally, her voice firm despite the tears pricking at her eyes. I'll do it. I'll transfer the money today. Oh, thank you, Emma. Lisa's voice burst with relief, her sobs turning into a choked, disbelieving laugh. I promise I'll pay you back. As soon as I can, I swear. You're saving my life. Emma forced a smile, though the ache in her chest refused to dissipate. It's okay, Lisa. Just focus on getting better. They ended the call, and Emma sat there for a long time, staring at her phone, her mind heavy with conflicting emotions. Relief that she could help her sister. Guilt for doubting her, even for a second. And a lingering sense of unease, a tiny voice in the back of her mind whispering that something wasn't quite right. But Emma silenced it, pushing it down deep where it couldn't reach her. Later that afternoon, she transferred the £5,000 to Lisa's account, her hands shaking as she typed in the amount. It was money she couldn't afford to lose, but what choice did she have? Family came first. That was what her parents had always taught her. Blood was thicker than water. But as she watched the balance in her bank account drop to an alarming low, that tiny voice resurfaced, louder this time. And despite her best efforts to ignore it, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she had just made a terrible mistake. A week had passed since Emma had wired the money to Lisa. The days drifted by in a fog of anxiety and uncertainty. Emma had tried calling Lisa a couple of times, eager to check in, to hear how her sister was coping with the impending surgery. But each time, her calls went unanswered, her texts left on read. It was unlike Lisa not to respond, especially after receiving such a significant sum of money. Emma tried to rationalize it, telling herself that Lisa was probably overwhelmed, preoccupied with medical appointments, tests, and consultations. Maybe she was too exhausted to talk, too scared to face the reality of her situation. But even as Emma tried to convince herself, a gnawing feeling of unease festered beneath the surface. On Friday afternoon, Emma's best friend, Grace, invited her to lunch at L'Ambiance, one of the city's most upscale and trendy restaurants. Emma hesitated. The place was expensive, far beyond her current budget, but Grace insisted, claiming she had a surprise to celebrate Emma's new beginning. Emma couldn't bring herself to decline. Grace had been her rock throughout the divorce, always ready with a bottle of wine and a shoulder to cry on. As they stepped inside the restaurant, Emma was immediately struck by the opulence of the place. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm, golden glow over the elegantly set tables adorned with white linens and sparkling glassware. Waiters in crisp uniforms glided through the room, balancing trays of artfully plated dishes and pouring glasses of champagne with effortless grace. The soft murmur of conversations, clinking glasses, and the gentle strains of a live pianist filled the air. Grace led Emma to a table near the back, nestled in a semi-private alcove surrounded by velvet drapes. Emma tried to relax, but her gaze kept drifting across the room, scanning the faces of the well-dressed patrons. That's when she saw them, Lisa and Ethan. They were seated by the window, a cozy corner table adorned with a vase of red roses and a chilled bottle of champagne. Lisa's back was turned to Emma, but there was no mistaking her long, chestnut curls and the familiar tilt of her head as she threw it back in a carefree laugh. Ethan was leaning forward, his blue eyes fixed on Lisa's face, a playful, almost flirtatious grin tugging at the corner of his lips. He was wearing the same suit Emma had bought him for their 5th anniversary, the one he'd insisted was too nice to wear anywhere but a Michelin star restaurant. Emma's stomach twisted into a painful knot. Lisa was wearing a stunning, emerald green dress that Emma had never seen before, a tight-fitting, off-shoulder number that clung to her curves and shimmered beneath the ambient light. A dress that must have cost a fortune. And on the table in front of them, an array of extravagant dishes: oysters, filet mignon, caviar, and a decadent chocolate souffle, sat untouched, like a scene for some glossy magazine spread. Emma's vision blurred as her pulse thundered in her ears. She gripped the edge of the table, her nails digging into the white linen. Beside her, Grace was saying something, her voice muffled and distant, as if underwater. "Emma?" Grace's brow furrowed, her eyes searching Emma's face with concern. "You okay? You look like you just saw a ghost." Emma swallowed, forcing herself to take a steadying breath. I need a minute," she muttered, pushing her chair back. Before Grace could respond, Emma rose from the table and walked toward the restroom, her steps unsteady, her heart hammering against her ribcage. She pushed open the door and stumbled inside, the sound of running water echoing through the empty, marble-tiled space. Emma gripped the sink, staring at her own reflection in the mirror. Her face was pale, her dark eyes wide and glassy, her chest rising and falling in quick, shallow breaths. A sudden, hot wave of nausea rolled through her, and she bent over the sink, feeling as if she might be sick. Lisa was supposed to be home, recovering, resting before her surgery. She was supposed to be struggling, not indulging in champagne and oysters at one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. And Ethan, what was he doing there? Why was he with Lisa? Emma squeezed her eyes shut, trying to banish the images that flashed through her mind. Lisa and Ethan, laughing, touching, sharing private, conspiratorial looks. The way Ethan had once looked at her, the way he'd touched her, kissed her, whispered things in her ear that he swore he'd never say to anyone else. Emma's stomach twisted painfully. Had they been seeing each other behind her back? Was that why Ethan had seemed so distant during the last few months of their marriage? And what about the money? The £5,000 that was supposed to go toward Lisa's medical treatment. Was that funding their luxurious lunch date now? The door to the restroom swung open, and Grace stepped inside, her expression tight with concern. "Emma? What's going on? You just bolted out of there like you'd seen a murder." Emma straightened, her hands trembling as she ran them under the cold water. "Lisa," she said, her voice flat and hollow. "She's here, with Ethan." Grace's eyes widened. "What? Are you sure?" Emma nodded, her jaw clenched so tightly that her teeth ached. "They're at the window table. Champagne, filet mignon, the whole works. She's supposed to be sick, Grace. She told me she needed money for a life-saving surgery, and I gave it to her. I gave her everything I had." Grace's face hardened, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Are you going to confront them?" Emma hesitated, her mind reeling. The impulse to march over there, to demand answers, to expose them both for the liars they were, pulsed through her like a live wire. But another part of her, the part that still clung to some thread of dignity, held her back. This was a public place, a fancy restaurant where people came to celebrate anniversaries and business deals, not to witness family drama. "No," Emma said finally, her voice taut and controlled. "Not here." Grace nodded, her jaw set in a grim line. "What are you going to do?" Emma exhaled a shaky breath, her mind already spinning with 1,000 questions and 1,000 possible scenarios. "I need to find out what's really going on. And I need to know how long it's been going on." Grace squeezed Emma's arm, her eyes soft with sympathy. "I'm so sorry, Emma. You don't deserve this." Emma forced a tight, brittle smile. "No," she said, her voice cold and sharp as a shard of glass. "I don't." As they left the restroom and returned to their table, Emma kept her eyes forward, refusing to look in Lisa and Ethan's direction. But she could feel them, their laughter, their intimate conversation, their clinking glasses, all of it cutting through her like a knife. And as she sat down, her mind was already working, formulating a plan. She would not act impulsively. She would not give them the satisfaction of knowing how much they had hurt her. But she would find out the truth. And when she did, they would both regret ever underestimating her. Emma spent the entire weekend pacing her small apartment, replaying the scene from the restaurant over and over again in her mind. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw them. Lisa in that expensive emerald green dress, her hair perfectly styled, and Ethan leaning in close, his eyes warm and attentive in a way they hadn't been during the last months of their marriage. The image gnawed at Emma's insides, a festering wound that refused to heal. She couldn't shake the sense of betrayal, not just because Lisa had lied about needing money for a medical emergency, but because she was sitting across from the man who had once promised Emma forever. How long had this been going on? Had they been sneaking around behind her back while she was drowning in the aftermath of the divorce? On Sunday night, Emma sat alone in the living room, a single lamp casting a soft, amber glow over the cluttered coffee table strewn with empty wine glasses and crumpled tissues. In her hand was her phone, Lisa's number displayed on the screen. Emma's thumb hovered over the call button, but she couldn't bring herself to press it. What would she even say? How could she ask her sister if she had lied about having a brain tumor? How could she accuse her of using the money to wine and dine Emma's ex-husband without sounding like a paranoid, bitter ex-wife? The tension twisted through her like a vice, and by midnight, Emma had decided that she couldn't wait any longer. She needed to see Lisa face to face, to look her in the eye and force the truth out of her. The next morning, Emma drove to Lisa's apartment. The building was in a trendy, gentrified area, the kind of place with sleek, modern architecture and exorbitant rent that Emma could never afford. She parked on the street and took a moment to steady her breathing, her pulse racing beneath her skin. As she approached the building, she rehearsed what she would say, how she would keep her emotions in check, how she would remain calm and composed, no matter what lies Lisa tried to spin. Emma pressed the buzzer and waited, her jaw clenched so tightly that her teeth ached. A few moments later, the door buzzed open. Emma stepped inside, her heels clicking against the polished marble floor as she made her way to the elevator. The ride up felt interminable, each floor ticking by like a countdown to an inevitable explosion. When she finally reached Lisa's door, she hesitated, her hand hovering over the doorbell. Emma took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and pressed it. The chime echoed through the hallway, and a moment later, the door swung open. Lisa stood in the doorway, her expression shifting from surprise to forced cheerfulness. Emma, hey, what a surprise. Emma's gaze swept over her sister, taking in the silk robe loosely tied at the waist, the freshly blown-out hair, the delicate gold necklace glinting at her collarbone. There was no sign of illness, no sign of the debilitating medical condition she had sobbed about over the phone just a week ago. Can I come in? Emma asked, her voice tight. Of course. Lisa stepped aside, her smile strained. I was just about to make some coffee. Want some? Emma nodded, following Lisa into the living room. The place was immaculate, every surface gleaming, the scent of vanilla candles lingering in the air. On the coffee table lay an open magazine, the glossy pages displaying a feature on expensive weekend getaways. Beside it, a half-empty flute of champagne glistened in the light. Lisa moved to the kitchen, pulling out a mug and pouring coffee with exaggerated casualness. So what brings you by? She asked, her back to Emma. Emma swallowed, her eyes fixed on the champagne flute. I was at Lambiance on Friday, she said, her voice carefully controlled. I saw you there. Lisa's hand faltered for a fraction of a second before she resumed pouring the coffee. Oh, really? I was there too, she said, her tone light. I met some friends for lunch. Emma crossed her arms over her chest, her gaze never leaving Lisa's back. You were with Ethan. Lisa stiffened, the muscles in her shoulders tensing beneath the robe. She set the coffee pot down, her hands gripping the counter. Oh, right. Yeah, Ethan was there too. Were you meeting him? Emma asked, her voice sharpening. Lisa turned around, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was just a coincidence. I ran into him there. We had lunch. Just catching up. Emma's jaw clenched. Catching up? While drinking champagne and eating filet mignon. That doesn't sound like a casual lunch, Lisa. Lisa's eyes flickered, her gaze darting away. Look, it's not what you think. Then what is it? Emma snapped, her voice rising. Because from where I was sitting, it looked like you were having a romantic date with my ex-husband, using the money you begged me for, claiming it was for a life-saving surgery. Lisa's face fell, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Emma stepped closer, her hands trembling. Did you even need surgery? Or was that just another lie? Lisa's eyes filled with tears, her lips quivering. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice breaking. I didn't know how to tell you. I was desperate. I've been struggling so much lately, and Ethan, he was just there and what? Emma demanded, her fists clenched at her sides. And you decided to scam me out of 5,000 pounds so you could impress my ex-husband with fancy dinners and designer dresses? Is that it? Lisa's tears spilled over, but Emma felt no sympathy, only a cold, hollow ache in her chest. It wasn't like that, Lisa insisted, her voice shaking. I was going to pay you back. I swear. Ethan and we just started talking, and he said he missed me, and... Missed you? Emma's eyes blazed, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. Were you seeing him while we were still married? Lisa shook her head violently. No, it wasn't like that. I swear, Emma. We ran into each other after the divorce. He was lonely. I was lonely. One thing led to another, and you thought it was okay to steal from me, Emma said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. To lie to me, to betray me. Lisa sobbed, collapsing onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. I was scared. I was alone. And Ethan, he said he would take care of me. Emma stared down at her sister, her heart pounding, her mind whirling with rage and disbelief. She had been so blind, so foolish, so desperate to believe in Lisa's lies, to be the good sister, the selfless one, the one who always forgave. Not this time. Emma's face hardened, her eyes cold and unyielding. You're going to pay me back every penny, she said, her voice icy and firm. And if you don't, I will take you to court. I have the bank transfer records, the texts you sent me begging for money, and the restaurant receipts. And as for Ethan, you can have him. You deserve each other. Lisa's sobs grew louder, but Emma turned away, walking to the door with steady, resolute steps. She had spent too many years being the one who picked up the pieces, who cleaned up everyone else's messes, who sacrificed her own happiness to keep the peace. Not anymore. As Emma stepped into the hallway, the weight of her sister's betrayal settled over her like a leaden cloak. But beneath it, a new fire burned. She had been played for a fool, but now she knew the truth. And she would make sure they both paid for what they had done. Emma drove away from Lisa's apartment, her knuckles white against the steering wheel, her jaw clenched so tightly that it sent sharp, pulsing pain through her temples. The city blurred around her, a kaleidoscope of taillights and neon signs, but Emma's mind was elsewhere. Her sister's tear-streaked face lingered behind her eyes, and Ethan's smug, knowing grin haunted her like a ghost. When Emma finally reached her apartment, she slammed the door behind her and sank onto the living room floor, her back against the wall. The silence pressed down on her, thick and suffocating. Lisa's sobs echoed in her head, each one a dagger, twisting deeper into her chest. How could her own sister do this to her? How could Ethan? It wasn't just the money. It wasn't just the lies. It was the feeling of being utterly betrayed by the two people who had once been closest to her, her sister and the man she once loved. Emma pressed the heels of her palms against her eyes, forcing back the tears that threatened to spill over. Crying wouldn't solve anything. Feeling sorry for herself wouldn't change what had happened. Lisa had taken advantage of her, manipulated her with a fabricated medical emergency, and Ethan had been complicit in it all. They'd stolen from her, and they were going to pay. The next morning, Emma woke with a renewed sense of determination. The ache in her chest remained, but it had hardened into something sharper, colder, a steely resolve that propelled her out of bed and straight to her laptop. She spent hours sifting through her bank statements, collecting every text, every call log, every email that Lisa had sent regarding the so-called medical emergency. She organized the evidence into neat, chronological folders, her fingers flying over the keyboard with an intensity that surprised even herself. By the afternoon, Emma had compiled a comprehensive file that laid out the entire scheme in excruciating detail. The initial plea for help, the emotional manipulation, the transfer of £5,000, and the conspicuous restaurant receipts from Lambiance. Each piece of evidence was a nail in the coffin of Lisa's lies, and Emma felt a grim sense of satisfaction as she reviewed it all. Now, it was time to make a decision. Emma considered filing a police report for fraud. She had every right to do so. Lisa had lied to her under the pretense of a life-threatening illness to swindle her out of thousands. But a criminal charge would mean dragging her sister through the courts, airing their family's dirty laundry in public, and possibly destroying what little remained of their relationship. Would it be worth it? Emma took a deep breath, leaning back against the chair and closing her eyes. Images of Lisa as a child flashed through her mind. Her sister running through the garden in their parents' backyard, her curls bouncing as she giggled, her small hands slipping into Emma's as they hid from their father's booming voice. Despite everything, despite the lies and the betrayal, Emma couldn't shake the memory of the little girl she once protected. No, she wouldn't involve the police. But that didn't mean she was going to let Lisa get away with it. Emma picked up her phone and dialed. The line rang twice before Lisa answered, her voice strained and hesitant. "Hello, it's me," Emma said, her tone cool and composed. "I need to see you. Now." There was a pause, followed by a shaky breath. "Emma, I already told you. Now, Lisa. Or, I'm going to the police." Another beat of silence, then a soft, "Okay." They met at a small cafe in a less glamorous part of town, far away from the upscale restaurants where Lisa had been flaunting Emma's money. When Emma walked in, Lisa was already seated in a corner booth, her eyes puffy and red, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee as though it were a lifeline. Emma slid into the seat across from her, folding her arms on the table. "I know everything," she said without preamble. "I know there was no surgery. I know you've been spending my money on Ethan, on fancy dinners, designer clothes, champagne. I have the receipts, the text messages, the bank statements. I could go to the police right now and have you charged with fraud." Lisa's eyes filled with tears, but Emma's face remained stony. "Emma, please," Lisa whispered, her voice breaking. "I am sorry. I know what I did was wrong, but I was desperate. After Ethan left you, he started calling me. He said he missed me, that he wanted to talk, that he was lonely. I thought he cared about me, but he only cared about what I could give him. And when I ran out of money, he started pulling away. That's when I called you. So you lied to me," Emma said, her voice cold. "You told me you were dying. You begged me for money, and I gave it to you because I thought I was saving your life. And all along, you were just using me to impress Ethan." Lisa's shoulders shook, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't know how to stop. Once I started lying, it just kept snowballing. And Ethan, he said he'd pay you back. He said it was just a loan until he got his bonus." Emma let out a bitter laugh. "Ethan doesn't have a job, Lisa. He lost it months ago. That's why he's been cozying up to you, because he saw you as a quick payday." Lisa's face crumpled, and she buried her face in her hands. "I'm so stupid," she sobbed. "I was trying so hard to be someone I'm not. I thought if I could give him what you couldn't, he'd love me. But all I did was ruin everything." Emma leaned back, crossing her arms over her chest. "You did ruin everything. You ruined our relationship. You ruined any chance of me ever trusting you again. But I'm not going to the police." Lisa's head shot up, her eyes wide and hopeful. "You're not?" "No," Emma said firmly. "But you're going to pay me back. Every penny. And if you don't, then I will go to the police. And I'll make sure Ethan goes down with you." Lisa nodded frantically, her face flushed. "I will. I swear. I'll get a second job. I'll sell my stuff, whatever it takes. I'll pay you back." Emma stood up, tossing a few bills on the table to cover Lisa's coffee. "Good. Because if you think I'm going to bail you out again, you're wrong. You're on your own now, Lisa." Without another word, Emma turned and walked out of the cafe, her shoulders square, her chin held high. The air outside was crisp and cold, biting against her skin as she strode down the street. For the first time in weeks, she felt lighter, as though a weight had been lifted off her chest. Lisa was still her sister, but Emma couldn't save her this time. And Ethan? He was nothing but a ghost now, a memory that she was finally ready to let go of. As Emma walked away, the wind whipped through her hair, and a sense of calm washed over her. She had lost 5,000 pounds. She had lost her sister's trust. She had lost her husband, but she hadn't lost herself. And that was something she intended to hold on to,